A fast food restaurant designed to look like a mid-century space-age triangle has been deemed an unacceptable obstacle to the process of adding more lanes of hot asphalt to central Texas. It is Monday, June 29th, 2026. Lambert Woollingham presents the Daily Shear, where we examine the modern preference for using paperwork to absorb the impact of physical crises, including a corporate divorce involving a peacock, a highly structured border detainment of a nun, and the sudden maritime inflation of container shipping rates. We begin in Austin, where the local landscape continues to be rearranged to better accommodate the needs of concrete mixers and high-end retail developments. The physical widening of Interstate 35 has claimed its latest landmark as the Capitol Plaza flagship location of P. Terry's prepares to close permanently. The State Department of Transportation has been systematically acquiring roadside properties, placing this distinctive mid-century modern triangular building directly in the path of the multi-billion-dollar expansion. Patrick Terry, the founder of the chain, noted that the site has served North Central commuters for years. While the business itself survives elsewhere, the loss of this space-age landmark highlights how the region's infrastructure ambitions routinely consume its local character. It appears that the future of Austin must be wide, flat, and entirely free of aesthetic distractions. The culinary expansion into the high-end suburbs of the Hill Country has encountered a sudden pause with the announced closure of the Oakwood Public Market in Driftwood. The artisan food hall and retail space is shutting down in early July, having remained open for less than 12 months. The owners stated they are recalibrating and reimagining the property, offering very few concrete details. The rapid retreat suggests that the market for high-priced local goods in the suburban outskirts has a much lower ceiling than developers calculated. It turns out that even affluent suburbanites occasionally prefer to buy their groceries without an accompanying lecture on the moral lineage of the goat. Austin's residential construction boom has succeeded in driving overall rents down, though the benefit has failed to reach the most vulnerable residents. Municipal researchers point out that while a massive influx of new apartments has forced market-rate landlords to lower prices, the shortage of housing for the lowest income earners remains unresolved. In response, city officials are preparing to restructure local policies and incentives to target households earning well below the median family income. The shift is an admission that the market forces which adjust the price of a rooftop pool do not build apartments for working-class service workers without legal coercion. It is a comforting reminder that the invisible hand is remarkably efficient, provided it is guided by a thick binder of city ordinances. Texas Democrats have concluded their 3-day state convention in Corpus Christi, aiming to end 30 years of Republican control over statewide offices. Party leaders focused their rhetoric on pragmatic pocketbook concerns and local infrastructure, seeking to position themselves as an alternative to culture wars. Democratic candidate Nathan Johnson expressed confidence in his campaign for Attorney General, banking on metropolitan voting shifts and suburban fatigue to break the cycle of defeat. Whether this optimism can survive the mathematical reality of rural turnout in November remains the central question. It is a noble tradition, preparing for a political victory with the same dedicated enthusiasm that an ovis brings to a discussion about the annual shearing schedule. In McAllen, a brief incident occurred when federal immigration and customs enforcement agents detained a Catholic nun, Sister Letty, on her way to Sunday Mass. She was released later that afternoon, following direct intervention and condemnation from regional political and religious leaders. The agency's actions drew sharp criticism from immigration advocates, who described the detention of a prominent community servant as an unnecessary escalation. The incident highlights the ongoing friction between federal border enforcement and the sensitive social structures of the borderlands. It seems that even in a highly fortified security zone, the state occasionally remembers that arresting a nun on Sunday morning is a remarkably poor piece of public relations. The global economy is currently engaged in the delicate task of replacing expensive human breath with cheaper capital investments and highly leveraged corporate restructurings. Comcast has announced plans to spin off its NBC Universal and Sky Broadcasting units into a separate, publicly traded company. The tax-free transaction, taking about a year to finalise, will leave Comcast focused entirely on its broadband, wireless, and physical network infrastructure. The move is a quiet admission that the merger of content creation and physical distribution has struggled to compete against specialized streaming giants. The newly formed media entity will house Universal's film and television studios, NBC, Peacock, and the theme parks, attempting to find independent scale in a brutally consolidating landscape. It is a clean way of acknowledging that owning a Peacock is far less profitable than charging people a monthly fee to look at it. British Telecom and Verizon have agreed to combine their international enterprise units into a joint venture valued at $625 million. Verizon will pay an equalization fee to secure equal voting rights in the newly formed entity, which is expected to generate $4 billion in combined annual revenue. The consolidated business will serve more than 3,000 corporate clients across 180 countries, streamlining the global backbones of both companies. For British Telecom, the deal represents a much-needed exit from the costly management of international networks, allowing the company to refocus its capital on domestic fibre installation. It proves that sometimes the best way to expand your global reach is to simply pay someone else to handle your overseas callers. General Motors has expanded its automation at its Factory Zero plant in Detroit, installing 50 collaborative robots shortly after cutting more than 1,000 human assembly positions. The newly deployed machines, built by Fanuc, are tasked with assisting the remaining workforce in repetitive physical tasks, such as mounting body panels. The transition to robotics comes as inconsistent electric vehicle demand forces General Motors to adjust assembly lines and reduce payroll for its Hummer and Silverado programs. Labour advocates point to the move as a concrete example of manufacturers replacing expensive, unionised floor labour with capital-intensive technology under the banner of workplace safety. It is a highly modern operational compromise, where workers are laid off to save money and the remaining staff are given the comforting companionship of 50 tireless mechanical arms. British American Tobacco has announced plans to eliminate approximately 9,000 positions this year, representing a massive fifth of its global workforce. The manufacturer plans to directly cut 5,500 roles while outsourcing another 3,500, aiming to aggressively lower overhead and transition the enterprise toward artificial intelligence and digital operations. The move highlights a broader corporate trend where legacy consumer product giants are leveraging machine learning to gut administrative and marketing budgets. For employees, the restructuring is a stark reminder that legacy profits are no shield against corporate efficiency targets that favour automated processes over human staff. It appears that the cigarette of the future will be marketed entirely by algorithms that have never experienced a cough. Ocean shipping rates have surged to their highest levels since the 2024 Red Sea crisis, driven by a desperate scramble by American retailers to import goods before proposed Trump administration tariffs take effect. Companies are flooding maritime trade lanes with cargo, creating a capacity bottleneck that has sent spot container rates skyrocketing. The spike represents a direct front-running of trade policy as businesses build up inventories to delay the immediate impact of retaliatory levies. Economists warn that these elevated logistics fees will eventually work their way down to retail prices, triggering a premature inflationary bump ahead of actual policy implementation. It is a beautifully synchronized dance, where the mere threat of a tariff makes everything more expensive to move before a single law has even been signed. Beyond the immediate balance sheets, the larger machineries of statecraft and geopolitical friction are showing their usual disregard for diplomatic elegance. The United States Supreme Court is expected to rule this week on whether President Donald Trump has the unilateral authority to remove Federal Reserve Governor Lisa Cook from her post. Trump has sought Cook's ouster over unproven allegations of pre-appointment misconduct, while Cook's defenders argue the move is a politically motivated pretext to secure an administration majority on the central bank's board. Under current law, Federal Reserve governors can only be removed for cause, a standard designed to insulate monetary policy from short-term electoral cycles. A ruling in Trump's favor would deal a devastating blow to the central bank's historical independence, establishing a legal precedent where any president could purge non-compliant governors under subjective administrative pretexts. Of course, as an ovis who watches interest rates with deep suspicion, I find the prospect of a politically managed printing press to be about as reassuring as a wolf offering to guard the shearing shed. A series of Pakistani military airstrikes targeting border regions inside Afghanistan has resulted in heavy casualties, escalating the conflict between the neighboring nations. Taliban officials claimed the assault killed 36 civilians and injured over 160, while Islamabad defended the operation by claiming it successfully targeted and eliminated 32 active anti-Pakistan militants. The violence reflects Pakistan's growing impatience with the Taliban's alleged harboring of cross-border insurgent groups. The high civilian toll is expected to deepen the diplomatic freeze between the two regimes, raising fears of a broader conventional conflict along the heavily contested borderlands. It is a grim demonstration of how easily the rhetoric of counterterrorism translates into the physical reality of collapsed concrete. Israel's cabinet has approved a legislative proposal to formally recognize the World War I-era massacre of Armenians by the Ottoman Empire as a genocide. The move represents a historic departure from Israel's long-standing policy of diplomatic neutrality on the issue, which was maintained to preserve ties with Ankara. The sudden policy shift is widely seen as a direct diplomatic retaliation against Turkey, following months of severe deterioration in bilateral relations. By wielding a highly sensitive historical grievance, Israel aims to inflict maximum geopolitical discomfort on the Turkish government, demonstrating how historical tragedies are regularly mobilized as modern diplomatic leverage. It is always heartening to see history treated with such profound respect, particularly when that respect can be weaponized to ruin a former ally's afternoon. The ongoing humanitarian crisis in South America has entered a new phase as the United States Southern Command deploys a fleet of Navy warships, transport aircraft, and helicopters inside Venezuela. The sudden deployment follows back-to-back earthquakes that devastated the coastal state of La Guaira, leaving at least 1,400 dead, over 3,300 injured, and an estimated 64,000 people missing under collapsed concrete ruins. While officials emphasize the strictly humanitarian nature of the mission, The military intervention marks a highly unusual operational entry into a nation long hostile to American influence. The presence of United States forces on the ground offers Washington a critical strategic foothold under the cover of natural disaster response. It is a remarkable piece of logistical diplomacy where a physical tragedy opens a door that decades of economic sanctions could not even unlock. In the ongoing regional standoff, the United States and Iran have negotiated a tentative agreement to suspend maritime attacks in the Persian Gulf, offering a fragile reprieve for international shipping lines navigating the vital Strait of Hormuz. A United States official confirmed the pact, which would theoretically allow commercial oil tankers to move freely, though Tehran has yet to formally verify the terms of the deal or confirm the release of frozen assets. The announcement follows a volatile weekend of direct exchanges, including United States airstrikes inside Iran and drone hits on commercial vessels, which had completely stalled Swiss peace negotiations. The tentative truce highlights the high-stakes leverage Iran maintains over global energy choke points, successfully trading regional escalation for direct economic concessions. If we look at the Capitol Plaza flagship restaurant, with its neat geometric angles designed to evoke a future that never actually arrived, we can see the entire global structure represented in miniature. In Driftwood, a public market closed before it could even collect a full year of dust, because we have decided that high-end cheese is a substitute for a stable monetary policy. In Detroit, 50 silent robotic arms are currently mounting metal body panels onto electric vehicles that nobody seems to want to buy, replacing human assembly workers who had the distinct disadvantage of needing to eat and pay rent. And in Washington, the highest court is debating whether a central bank governor can be dismissed because she does not match the executive aesthetic of the hour. Perhaps the solution is to simply outsource the entire administrative state to those 50 Fanuc robots. They do not require a confirmation hearing, they do not belong to a political party, and they are remarkably consistent at repeating the same empty mechanical gesture until the power is turned off. We could place one at the head of the Federal Reserve, one in McAllen to handle the door at Sunday Mass, and perhaps a few dozen in Caracas to gesture politely at the ruins. The paperwork would remain immaculate. The corporate mergers would continue to spin off into smaller, equally unprofitable entities, and the rest of us could stand quietly by the side of the expanded highway, waiting for a triangle to return. The paperwork has been filed, the lanes are being widened, and the machinery remains entirely indifferent to whether you have a place to sit. It is a very orderly way to manage a decline. The Peacock has been packed into its cardboard box. The robots are quietly recharging in Detroit, and Lambert Woollingham is left wondering if the state transportation department will eventually find a way to widen the entire planet by another 3 lanes. The day has been shorn until tomorrow.